Hello, and thank you for joining me on Oakville Matters. Thanks to your TV, this is our chance to talk about what matters to Oakville. And certainly one of the most important parts of the livability of our town is having higher education for our kids and for our adults who want to return to education after some other adventure in life. And joining me today is Dr. Janet Morrison, who is the leader of Sheridan College. And she spent many years working in the university world and has become the head of Sheridan College, a mighty three-campus, three-city institution. And I wanted to start off by asking you, Dr. Morrison or Dr. Janet, whatever I can call you, uh, does it bother you that you're not a university, that Sheridan is only a college?
So first off, everybody just calls me Janet. Students call me Janet and faculty and staff call me Janet. So I would invite you, your worship, to call me Janet. I have lots of family in Oakville and they'd be horrified to think anybody called me anything other than Janet. So you know what? So Sheridan's had a long history of aspiration and certainly not foreign to residents of Oakville. Was a period of time when we were looking at becoming a university. At the end of the day, Sheridan is amazing and in fact, globally recognized in its unique space. So we like to say we're not a college, we're not a university, we're not a polytechnic. What we are is a vanguard institution delivering a galvanizing education experience for the world we know now. And so we're committed to preparing graduates for a really complex world, a world that's so much more complex than it was even 2 years ago. And so on many levels, it doesn't matter what we're called, we typically just go by Sheridan. So I go by Janet, and as a learning community, we go by Sheridan.
Well, I like the idea that you have a new category of institution called a vanguard.
Yeah.
And as evidence that you might be onto something, my daughter Sarah, after she got her degree from Queens, followed that up with a community college period where she got some practical knowledge.
Yeah.
But Vanguard, college, university, or hybrid of whatever, is there a university on the planet that's got more Oscars than Sheridan?
No, Mr. Mayor, of course not. We're incredibly proud. Sheridan, Oakville is home to Sheridan's long celebrated program in animation. Sheridan's been tremendously proud to serve the town of Oakville for decades. Our program in animation remains on our Trafalgar campus. That program and our related programming in animation, arts, and design has been celebrated on many levels, Emmys and Oscars among the awards that we're most proud of. And I would tell residents of Oakville and all the communities we serve that we're looking forward. Domi Shi, who is our most recent Academy Award winner, is coming out with her first feature film in 2022. So stay tuned for Red.
All right. Well, I know that you've once again been named the top animation school in Canada. And what surprised me about that was I wasn't sure there was another animation school in Canada, and second in the world. And so it begs the question, who on earth thinks that anybody else is better than Sheridan, and who is that, and where is that place?
Well, we're not going to give them any name recognition. So I appreciate your pride, Mr. Mayor, spoken like the proud mayor in the town where, Sheridan goes back and forth. We have a couple of, like everybody, we have some nemesis in these spaces. So tremendously proud. There are other animation programs in Canada. But Sheridan has secured its spot at the top of that list. And that really is a reflection, first and foremost, of the quality of our faculty and our staff, many of whom call the community of Oakville home. And it's really a testimony to the genius of our students who continue to bring creativity and enthusiasm and innovation to all of our programs, and specifically animation. So lots of pride. It runs deep, deep at Sheridan.
Yeah, I don't want to take anything away from the other programs. You have You have a musical theater program that attracts kids from all over the world and attracts my wife and me to your shows every spring.
Yep.
Uh, what's uh, what I know that one of the things that's on people's minds is how are you dealing with COVID, the pandemic, the vaccines? How big of a struggle are you having with all of that?
Yeah, so what a great question, quite a loaded question, I think, for leaders around the globe. Certainly the immediacy of the pivot to virtual space was really difficult for post-secondary institutions, not just in Ontario, but across the country, around the globe. Again, just kudos, hats off to the faculty and staff who call Sheridan home. Over a period of about 3 or 4 days, Mr. Mayor, we had to move over 3,700 courses from in-person delivery to online formats. And you can imagine in many of our globally recognized disciplines, that was really challenging. Illustration, for example, has just demonstrated genius in trying to figure out how to use technology, 3D cameras, expertise from our Bachelor of Film and Television, for example, to move to online space. So, it's been a very challenging 20 months. You noted our degree program in musical theater. Certainly one of our points of pride was being an incubator for Come From Away, which I'm so pleased is reopening downtown mid-December. So I hope theater buffs take advantage of the reopening of Toronto to live theater. We're all excited about that. But Sheridan never really closed. Our skilled trade center, many of our healthcare programs were considered essential services as the province responded to the pandemic. And now in its recovery, we were never closed. I don't think we went much below 30% in-person delivery in, for example, our personal support worker programs or our practical nursing programs. You can imagine, not easy to teach plumbing online. But we've now moved over the fall term with lots of support and infrastructure in place. We're just below 50%. So I think we're at 45% in person, but that will ramp pretty quickly in January to 80% in person. And of course, that rests on a robust kind of plan, and in particular, a vaccine mandate, and lots of community interventions to make sure that everybody stays safe. We're tremendously proud of the commitment that every member of the Sheridan community has made to putting safety and well-being, both physical and mental health and well-being first over the course of the last 20 months. So we're looking forward to January when our campuses, we hope anyway, will revert back to the level of animation that excites and engages people.
Well, I know when I went to university, the animation of life on campus, just the expression life on campus was
Yep.
half the draw. And
Yeah.
it was a bonus if we learned something on top of that. Uh, Not for nothing was the expression party school invented.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, I think that a lot of viewers might want to know, how have students adjusted to the pressure and the stress of the pandemic? I mean, I think my experience is that the younger you are, the more worried you are about the pandemic in terms of what's the future going to be like. The more future you have left, the more you worry about what's the future going to be like, is my simple theory here.
Yeah.
What's been what's been your experience with your students?
Yeah, you know what? It's quite interesting, isn't it? Because on the one hand, I think there is tremendous anxiety on the part of our students, and Sheridan serves a wide age range of learner, but many of our students are between kind of 18 and 24. For many of those learners, there was huge anxiety in the early days around social isolation. Huge worries about income support. The lack of availability to part-time work in particular just caused immense financial stress for many of our learners. And those stories that I heard in the early days, particularly from international students, but also from independent parents who really relied on part-time employment that got cut in those early days. And in the absence of community, physical community, this was really, really difficult. I would say that for me, and my kids are teenagers too, so all of us were living this pandemic personally, professionally, in public spaces, in private spaces. For me and for many of my colleagues, whereas students weren't really worried about digital transformation, the intense reliance on technology. For me, as kind of a self-described old school educator, for me, the in-person, again, community of a classroom was something I missed desperately. I was telling my partner and my kids and my colleagues that I don't teach anymore, but I make it my mission to be in the Tim Hortons lineup every day. I eat in the cafeteria when I can. I routinely talk to students in the lineup to get my lunch about what's happening with them and what their aspirations are and how Sheridan can better fuel their goals. So I think, the worries and the anxieties were different. For me, again, as an educator, the biggest source of anxiety and what undermined mental health and well-being most acutely was the absence of community. And I think we're figuring out how to reconstruct that and live it through alternate mediums. But again, I'm old school on this front. I think if nothing else, Sheridan, we're only back about 45% in-person classroom delivery, but our campuses are open. So provided you're fully vaccinated, you're welcome to come to campus as a learner to access our studios, our libraries, our supplemental instruction spaces. And I really do think that that's what people have been craving. We've certainly supplemented over the course of the last 20 months with a considerable number of supports intended to do everything from help people learn how to optimize Zoom and Teams and WebEx, but we've got wellness hubs, we have complimentary access to mindfulness, Headspace, the Headspace app. We've made flexible work arrangements the norm. There's all kinds of things that we can be doing. I think we have to reimagine what community means, because that's what I love about post-secondary education. That's really what fuels its transformative impact, is the notion of community collaboration, engagement.
Have you seen a peaking of the use of the supports that you put in place? I'm sort of expecting that over time, the people that needed to use it would have used it and gained what they needed from it, and your demand might fall off. Certainly, if the demand were falling off, it would be a cause for some optimism, I would think. What's the situation on use?
Yeah, so I'll focus. This mental health and well-being, community mental health and well-being, is a priority for me across students, faculty, and staff, because I know you share this sentiment, but it's communities that need to be healthy, right? So, and that entails everything from the green space that pervades our campuses, to the culture around taking breaks and investing in self-care. So the community, we're really vested in a community well-being commitment. For our students, and again, I'll just speak to the 18 to 24-year-old group, in part because that's our biggest demographic, and also just that's the student population I study as a researcher. There's been a crisis of mental health in that particular cohort that really has been unrelenting for the last decade or so. And there are many, many theories about what's driving that. But the pandemic, and specifically the isolation and the financial hardship that was brought on, really critically and acutely did nothing to make that better. What I think we've learned in the precipitous shift to online virtual space is that some of the supports that we pride ourselves on can be delivered in different ways. So for example, we do a lot of virtual personal counseling now. We use apps in a different way, and technology broadly in a different way. I think there's far more consciousness, thanks to popular media, about the negative aspects of some social media platforms, for example. So there's been a consciousness raising, and then there's been a diversification of what interventions we have at our disposal. There still are not sufficient resources available for that age group, in my view. The post-secondary system needs to do more. Communities need to do more. It is really, it's not easy to be 18 to 24 right now. The world is changing. There is real anxiety about what the future looks like and how young people are going to support themselves going forward. It's not the world that I grew up in, let's say.
So what sort of help from the community, what could the community help with? I just want to pick up on that one little part of what you said,
Yeah.
that they need more than what they can get from the college. They need support from the community. Flesh that out.
Yeah. Well, so maybe I'll use as an example some of our students who come to Canada or to Ontario or to the communities of Oakville, Brampton, and Mississauga from a bit farther afield, whether those are international learners, out of province learners. What we know promotes positive mental health and positions students to flourish are things like community support. So I think there's a role for faith-based institutions. I think there's a role for interculturally competent mental health services across, again, Peel region, Halton regions. I think sometimes we underestimate the value of work integrated learning, which is something that Sheridan is heavily invested in. We rely on our industry and community partners to provide opportunities through placements, internships, co-ops. But all of those things, if you think about, a really healthy, vibrant, beautiful tree, what underpins that are roots. And we think about this, I'm sure you and I think about it similarly in relation to our kids, our grandkids. It's roots that give people a healthy support system. We need to, I think, share responsibility, all levels of government, community agencies, industries, post-secondary institutions, for providing that stability and those sources of support for learners. It can't just happen on a campus because, in part, learners don't live on a campus forever. If we do our job, they're here, they grow, they develop, and then they launch. And so broadly, I think we need to work more collaboratively on issues of positive mental health. The other piece is it can't wait often until a student gets to college or university. We often see students that have been struggling for a while. And so, how are we working with our K-12 partners and with community health agencies to ensure that wellness, positioning students, learners, families to flourish is really something that we're all actively engaged in.
Well, I can tell you that I find that what you said resonates with me, and my office, I'll boldly offer right now that if you have students who would benefit from some part-time work experience, whatever it's called, intern, co-op,
Yep.
I get that. Oh, you had a lovely master phrase, work integrative experiences.
Work integrated learning. That is
All
the
right.
that's the pedagogy. So curriculum is what we teach. Pedagogy is how we teach it. Sheridan believes that students learn best when they have practical experience. And so you've been so tremendously supportive to Sheridan, Mr. Mayor. So thank you for that. You have my assurance somebody will follow up with you.
All right, work integrative learning, WIL, and
Will,
and the mayor's
exactly.
office.
Put a
Sure.
hashtag in front of that and you'll be
That's right.
hanging with the cool kids.
All right, we'll be all over that for you. And then I want to also spend some time chatting with you about diversity and inclusion, which is a very big deal for the Oakville Council and me. And I know that you and your institution have really taken a leadership role in diversity and inclusion, especially in the indigenous part of that, the truth and reconciliation task that, and I guess I could call generational work that's in front of us. So first, thank you and congratulations on your leadership role in this area. What has been that like for you?
Oh, well, so Sheridan has undertaken a number of initiatives to try and render our learning spaces, our communities more inclusive. And I would not be truthful if I didn't acknowledge that this has been very difficult work for the community. I'm mindful of Senator Sinclair's work in the TRC recommendations. Until you have to actually live them, you might not recognize the importance of the truth piece of truth and reconciliation. And I think, the gravity of the truth that has certainly been underscored by the findings of unmarked graves across the country. The truth part has been very difficult. I think Sheridan's contribution, our commitment, as always, but certainly more intense in the last couple of years, has been to listen. So, there has been a reckoning on race. There has been a realization of the enormity of truth to be accepted, acknowledged, embraced, and then reconciled. Part of what we've done in that space, I'll offer up two examples. The first is that we have a council now, an Equity, Diversity, Inclusivity Advisory Council that reports into our board quarterly, really ensuring that we're accountable on what needs to be done and the timelines that we've committed to. I think the other piece of the puzzle that I'd acknowledge is our employee census. So we conducted a self-identification census in 2020 that captured 6 domains of diversity. And so that report really provided us with a baseline and some commentary on experience so that we can really be guided by data and best practices, using the advisory council as a check and balance to ensure that the decisions we're making really do reflect our community and our commitment to being more inclusive.
Well, now you've said, I think, that it's important not to approach, Indigenous people live in Oakville in their thousands, and Indigenous people were, if you will, one of the 3 founding groups of our town. But you've said a very interesting thing, which is that the rest of us shouldn't place on an Indigenous person an expectation that they be an expert in all things Indigenous, that they don't need to, that we shouldn't make people feel like they have to be an expert in indigeneity.
Yep.
I didn't think I could pronounce that.
You did a good job there.
Indigeneity. So where does that insight come from, and where does that take us?
Well, so I know we're short on time, but what I would say is that I have been on the receiving end of tremendously kind and generous coaching and mentoring and advisement from Indigenous leaders. Some of what I have learned is it's actually not their responsibility to educate me, that the burden on them as Indigenous peoples is significant enough. It's not their job to make sure that I am aware and conscious of the truth. And so as an educator, what I take away from that is that I actually have to take responsibility for that. It's not every Indigenous person's responsibility to teach and educate. It's actually mine. And I think that's as good a call to action as any in the current landscape.
So there's a bit of a movement going on where organizations appoint or recruit an Indigenous advisor. And one of the roles that they sometimes play is to, start the meeting and deliver invocations and stuff. And I'm wondering if that's consistent with what you're talking about. Or are you talking about it? Or you're talking about us taking far more personal responsibility for what we're doing?
Yeah. So I'll just very quickly give you an example. We absolutely have Indigenous leaders on campus, but we have a land acknowledgement that is in fact available for the community. But one of the things that our Indigenous leadership, and most specifically my colleague Elijah, coaches and mentors us on is that you actually have to make the land acknowledgement real for you. And so it's not a rote land acknowledgement. You need to read the land acknowledgement, embrace it, and tailor it for the event or the audience that you're delivering it to. And in that way, we as settlers communicate to the community what the real meaning of the land acknowledgement is, as opposed to it just being recited verbatim. So, you know, give and take.
All right. Well, I think that's important guidance, and I certainly have, it resonates for me. I think it has to come from a place of truth inside me when I say it.
Yeah.
And
agreed.
That's certainly the spirit that animated the land acknowledgement I wrote. It's not your normal land acknowledgement. It's almost 2 minutes long. It's a story.
Yeah. Well, and there's that word again, Mayor, animate. So thank you very much. So we open and we close.
Well, it's always fun to have anything to do with Sheridan. I was a willing partner in quite an extensive effort with one of your predecessors to create foreign entanglements and liaisons that I'm not sure ever led any. I'm not sure we ever succeeded, but it sure was a mighty effort. What's your personal expectation for the year ahead of you?
Well, you know, I think like the rest of the country, we're really invested in pandemic recovery. So, you know, we join the communities we serve in ensuring that both economically and socially, we recognize what the pandemic taught us about inequity and marginalization, and that we embrace opportunity and innovation to set a positive path forward. So Sheridan looks forward to partnering with the town of Oakville on that front. Thank you for the opportunity today.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for tuning in and watching. If you ever get the bug to learn more and improve yourself and just acquire another skill, remember, Sheridan is a great resource in our community, a major bulwark of our livability, and I hope to see you next time.